Hey everyone, it's Aesah, and welcome to my video on the Crew. The Crew is a pretty weak comp overall on the current patch, 15.1b, but it is pretty simple to play, and personally I actually think this comp is a lot of fun. But overall it's pretty weak. In fact, if you just scroll down for like the average placements, you have to go down to like the 20th comp until you can find this here, all the way down here. The best variation, you just play all the crew units plus Strategist. Janna gives Protector with Malphite. And then Rise gives like his nice team-wide mentor bonus, and Jarvan's just an amazing unit. Ziggs, of course, is Strategist, so that's kind of like the best additions you can play. Eventually, you can go Bastion for Shen. But overall, yeah, this comp just doesn't perform that well. It is better in lower elos due to how straightforward it is to play. You actually never need to press the F level up key. You can always just roll for the most part until you 3-star everything and have Twisted Fate. But if you actually look at their average placement in GM Plus, it's actually averaging a 5, so even worse than this. But if you look at lower elos, like for example, like bronze or silver, it's actually doing quite well, doing above average. So pretty straightforward comp to play. Not that strong, honestly. I'd say it's like C tier on my TFT. I feel like that's pretty accurate. I would say this is a C tier comp, but it is conditional. There's certain augments that make it pretty good. Where is the team builder? Okay, team builder has disappeared. Let's go to tactics.tools. Um, yeah, there's certain augments that can make it good, like Prismatic Ticket can be pretty good. The crew specific augment, I believe it's called Space Age, gives you the equivalent of about like 10 duplicators. It's really wild. Like that augment is really good if you have a few units to start out with. I'd look into playing the crew if you hit Space Age. And then Treasure Hunt as well works really well with the crew. But yeah, maybe this comp will be buffed later, but maybe you just want to play it as well. Early game, having the crew in early game is actually not that important because it's a very unique trait. I've never seen any trait like this before in TFT that I can think of where you get different bonuses based on how many units you have 3-starred. If you don't have anything 3-starred, you only get this top bonus, which is 5 health and attack speed for each crew member fielded. That's very, very little. Just for example, if you think health and attack speed are about equal, you can compare this to Duelist, which will give, um, around 20% attack speed, or compare this to 2 Heavyweight, which will give about 20% health. They each actually give a little bit more than that, so you can see playing 2 crew, or even 3 crew, or even 4 crew is actually pretty weak if you're not getting the 3-star bonuses. So early game, you actually don't even have to play this board. You can even have these units on your bench and play a completely different board. Like you could play something like this. Of course, if you're holding units on your board and playing units on your bench, then maybe you're losing econ. So you could just lost streak early. If you have these units upgraded, which is one of the indicators to play the crew, um, I would say like the most important thing in taking this line is you have a lot of the units naturals. I would want to have. I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to play this too much on the current patch, but if you are, I would want to have like, at least 6 of the units between these two. Ziggs and Shen are not that important. 10 gold basically makes 1 gold per round. So if you're holding a Ziggs as early as stage 1, you're kind of losing like zero point 0.3 gold per round in interest. So a Ziggs on stage 1 actually costs you about like 5 gold. You can hold it, but it's not super important. Um, so you don't have to play around these units, but ideally you can just play Protector and Sniper. So Kennen as Protector, or you can go Janna, who will eventually be your Protector because she's strategist with Ziggs, and then a Sniper, which will commonly be Gnar. Something like this is fine. This will kind of be your early game, and then as you'll level up, you'll just add in Shen, Ziggs, plus the Strategist. Very important is you never pump levels with this comp. You always reroll. Uh, Basically on 3-1, you'll be level 4, 8 out of 10, leveling to 5 natural next round. You'll want to use a lot of rolls on this round because to find your 1 cost, because the 1 cost odds are 55% and they'll go down to 45%. Meaning you need to roll about 20% more to find 1 cost, but you really want to hit your 1 cost as soon as possible because you want to unlock this 1 free reroll per round once you hit Malphite and Sivir. That's basically just an extra 2 gold per round. Um, if you have to roll down to 30 from 50, for example, that one reroll makes up for 2 lost interest. You can kind of think of it that way. Also, you just kind of want to spike as soon as possible in order to start winning rounds, because winning rounds gives goals, saves HP, just good stuff. Yeah. Early game, you'll use Sivir as your carry just because you will be 3-starring her. Eventually, you'll move your items off and use Ziggs and Twisted Fate as your main carry. Twisted Fate 1 can take items over Sivir. Um, when you when you move off Sivir, you don't need Sniper anymore, so you can drop Gnar. Note when you do play Gnar, he buffs the units next to him, so you want these two to be next to each other. And then just good units to add. You can add Strategist. Braum will give Bastion. I don't think any of the other Bastions are really worth playing, but Rise just has a nice mentor buff as well. And then Jarvan is just a really good unit. So since you're kind of getting Strategist kind of for free in this comp, this is basically going to be the board you're looking for on level 8. If you have Braum, you can play him as well. And this will be kind of like your level 9 board. You don't need to solo frontline Malphite, but Stoneplate is just a pretty good item because for a long time, he probably is just going to be, when he's 3-starred, you go through a decent portion of the game with Malphite 3, but no Shen 3. So you can go like Stoneplate. It's definitely not necessary by any means. I wouldn't greet it. Like any chain item, you can just slam. I would probably avoid Bramble. Bramble's okay. It's not the worst. It makes Malphite actually do more damage since his ability scales off his armor, but he also gets a lot of armor just naturally from his passive. And in the current meta on 15.1b, there's a lot of AP in the meta, so you don't want to over-index on armor. Your Malphite is going to be a little bit too squishy. So like Declaw is really good, HP items are good, Stoneplate's good. Don't greed too hard, but your Malphite, getting 3 out of Malphite as early as possible. It doesn't have to be exactly any perfect items. If you have like Crown Guard, that's fine. Adaptive is fine. Steadfast is fine. But yeah, 3 on Malphite is going to be really important. Other itemization things, Sivir actually does a lot of her damage through auto attacks. I see people itemize Sivir wrong very frequently. I see builds like this, for example. All 3 of these items are pretty bad. First of all, the Crew just gives you a lot of attack speed. Even when you're playing 4 before you find Twisted Fate, you're getting 20% attack speed. So you don't actually need that much more attack speed. She doesn't do that much of her damage through her ability. Her ability is actually a little bit unreliable. It can miss more than probably any other ability in the entire game. So Infinity Edge is actually much worse than just something like Deathblade that amplifies her auto attacks a little bit more. And same thing with Shojin, you just don't need to cast her ability more. Her auto attacks are a lot better. The best item is actually Kraken Slayer on Sivir, because the Crew will give you built-in attack speed and allow you to stack that Kraken faster. Yeah, so because you have built-in attack speed, Rageblade is not that good. It's not the only reason. Like, for example, Rageblade Kayle, who has built-in attack speed, is really good because Kayle is a very defensive-oriented comp where you play like 6 Juggernauts, you're investing a whole bunch of resources in defenses. But the Crew is an offensive-oriented trait. It does give you some health, so if you're playing like 4 Crew before you find Twisted Fate, you will get 20% health on the Crew champion, but that's very little compared to, you know, a real trait you're investing 4 units in. The Crew is mostly an offensive trait. The main value of this comp is, well, at first the extra econ, but then once you get 3 Crew and then 4 Crew unlocked, basically all your Crew units start dealing about 25% more damage, 20 to 25% depending on whether you have Magic Shred. And that's the main value of the trait. It also gives, of course, like 20% attack speed. So the Crew is absolutely not a defensive trait. Your fights are not that long, so Rageblade is not very valuable. And again, you already have a lot of attack speed. So Last Whisperer is good. Giant Slayer is going to be good. Gunblade is not going to be amazing, but it's going to be fine. You rather just do more damage in this comp. Eventually, so Sivir is always going to be the first carry you play around because you're going to be 3-starring her anyway. Always primary itemize Sivir. Eventually, Twisted Fate can take your AD items, so you can just move them directly here. But that's why it's kind of nice to actually have items like Striker's Flail, or Giant Slayer, because then you can actually move these items to Ziggs, because most often you're actually going to have 3-star Ziggs before Twisted Fate, and 3-star Ziggs is also a better carry than Twisted Fate 1. Um, but eventually you'll want to itemize these two units, but you'll start out itemizing Sivir, and then at some point Sivir and Ziggs. Ziggs, I think I find also is very frequently itemized incorrectly. People kind of look at the passive and they're like, oh, okay, so like you want to prioritize his auto attacks. Um, Most of his damage still comes from his ability. You can think of him more of an AD caster. His damage profile is much more similar to like Caitlyn or Senna, maybe, who these units still care mostly about their ability, even though their auto attacks hit. Their auto attacks will do damage because they're AD units. Ziggs is still a caster like this, so don't treat him don't treat him like an auto attacking unit like Ashe or like Kale, for example. But he's a little bit more similar to Senna than another AP unit like Malzahar, because his auto attacks will do some damage. It's not like a crazy amount more. Like 2 star Ziggs is 90 damage. I believe Malzahar is 60 AD, so it's not even like Ziggs' auto attacks are crazy. It will scale with AP, but he is still primarily a caster. So items that help him cast more, something like this, is going to be good. Um, Same thing, Ziggs gets a lot of attack speed. The crew is a primarily offensive trait, so Rageblade is going to be bad. I see Rageblade built in this comp all the time. It's just not very good because this comp, again, just is not a defensive comp. Your fights are not going to be long. You're always gonna want Shred for your primary damage source, so that can come wherever. If you have both AD and AP itemized, you can go for Sky Piercer, but ideally you just have like a Void Staff somewhere, and then like a even shot somewhere. If you have AD items, you're always gonna want anti heal as usual, so that could be Morello or it could be Sunfire. Twisted Fate can spread it pretty well late game because his very first attack will hit 3 enemies. Otherwise, you can kind of just put it on whoever, honestly. Janna will hit 2 enemies. Sivir will hit about 2. There's not any really great appliers of it, but yeah. When can you push levels? After you have Ziggs 3, you don't need to roll anymore. I did specify earlier you should always roll, but I want to clarify, even if you're level 6 and you're only looking for Ziggs, you should still roll. I think some people think you should level to 7, but, you know, normally you want to roll on 7 for 3 costs, that's true, but since rolling gives you XP at 50% of the rate, and then your shops are not 50% worse than they are at level 7. Like your shops are better than that. So it's better to just roll your way to level 7 instead of pumping XP to 7 and then rolling with the crew. I would basically only pump XP if I were level 8. I already had all the crew units 3-starred. I already had Jarvan 2-starred. Rise is probably not that important because the crew is a selfish trait. It only buffs the crew units. So you don't really want to be itemizing your non-crew units. Rise is mostly used for the synergy. Same with Janna. You can itemize Janna if you have extra items, but ideally you're itemizing your crew units. Again, it's a selfish trait. So if you have like all of these units, you don't need Rise, and you don't have Twisted Fate, I would probably still roll just on level 8 for Twisted Fate to kind of like efficiently push away there. But if you had like this exact board and you're level 8, I could see just pushing levels, trying to go 9, and then fitting in like a Braum for Bastion. Otherwise, it's more efficient to just look for Twisted Fate on level 8 and work your way towards 9 that way. Okay, so I think I've covered some augments, items, positioning. You'll want your strongest carry in the corner, just because to protect them. You can do something early game with Sivir where you can put her on the edge of your front line and oftentimes she can hit 4 units. So let's just say our opponent has a front line that looks like this. What will happen is this walks here and this will walk here, and then your Sivir will hit all of these units. Sivir does have quite a bit of damage fall off per hit, 40%. This is still worth it in the early game, but in the later game, you're just going to want to protect your strongest carries in the corner. Maybe something like this. Strongest tank in front of strongest carry. Basic TFT fundamentals here. One last thing I want to talk about is power-ups for this comp. Let's go back to Meta TFT. Hopefully it is working now. And early game, you're going to want your power-ups on Sivir and Malphite mostly when they're 3-starred. This will be a decent portion of the game. Sivir's never going to be your permanent carry. So I would recommend against any of these scaling ones like Final Form, Hero's Arc, over 9,000, Max Attack. These are all power-ups that kind of give up strength in order for late game strength. Instead, I think like Midas Touch is really nice just because you might lose some rounds in the early game if you had because you had Midas Touch instead of a stronger power-up, but you might win some rounds in the later game because you had the extra gold from Midas Touch. Either way, it will give a little bit of combat power here. I think this is really good. Sky Piercer can be nice early game if you have a strong Ziggs as well. So this can amplify the Ziggs damage as well as your Sivir damage. Other than that, yeah, Precision's fine. Hemorrhage is abilities only. Again, Sivir does a lot of her damage with physical, so Hemorrhage is pretty bad. Mage, I think, is extremely bad because yes, you're casting your ability twice, but you're doing so much of your damage with auto attacks, and Mage is reducing the damage there. Ramping Rage is actually okay, since just because earlier I mentioned like Rage Blade and attack speed is not that good, but Ramping Rage is just like decent value for the power up. Either way, Sivir power up not too important. Just avoid the scaling ones, since eventually you will not be carrying her primary. Ziggs, you can use kind of these. Let's talk about Space Age here. Space Age is not that good. This is 75%, I believe. The Crew rockets basically make your units do about 20% more damage-ish, 20 to 25. So doing 75% more of that is basically making your Ziggs do about 15% more damage, like 15 to 17% more damage. You'd rather have something like Shadow Clone, which basically just does 25% more damage, as well as gives you another body that can tank. Other than that, like Keen Eye or just anything that gives your Ziggs more damage is going to be fine. I do want to talk about Frost Touch real quickly. Frost Touch has a really, really strong 2-piece. The 1-piece is very bad. I've never actually seen anyone go for this, but allegedly, according to the site, Ziggs and Twisted Fate can go for it. So if you have Twisted Fate, maybe this is something you can try out, going for the Frost Touch 2-piece. It reads, I've actually never seen it, but just by reading it, this would be extremely, extremely strong. It's worth giving up frontline power up if you can get exactly 2-piece Frost Touch. But if you can't, the 1-piece is actually pretty bad. It seems pretty risky, honestly, because let's say you use your fruit on your Twisted Fate and you don't hit it, now you're stuck with Frost Touch on Ziggs. I guess I would always want to save one remover at the end to take Frost Touch off. Like, let's say I had 4 removers, I can use 3 of them to dig for double Frost Touch, and if I miss, I can use the last one to get rid of it. Either way, the 1-piece is really bad, but the 2-piece is really overpowered. I've never seen it, just reading what it does here. Most importantly, actually, is going to be your Malphite power up. Malphite is just like one of the most important units in this comp. You always itemize him, even with 3-star Shen, to take advantage of his passive ability. And generally, you're always going to have a power up on this guy for the entire game. That way, I think like something that scales like over 9,000. If you can get it very early, can be good. Same thing with something like Max Vitality or Singularity are going to be okay if you get them early. That being said, I think Singularity and Max Vitality are just like not that great to begin with. They have to scale quite a lot to even break even with something like standalone 35% HP. Generally, body change is going to be better than standalone. this power up is worded a little confusingly. It says take the form of nearest ally. I believe that's purely cosmetic. So you're basically taking this for the 30% shield and the 30% shield on your Shen. There are some things that can scale with health, such as regen if you have Dragon's Claw, but in general, 30% shield is just as good as 30% health. So standalone's a little bit more in the Malphite, but of course 30% on another unit vastly outweighs that. So body change really good. I think resistant, I've talked about this in pretty much every single comp guide I've made. Resistant I think is just good. It's good against small instances of damage. Karma's really popular right now. Yumi's really popular. Ashe is pretty popular. So it's good against all of those. Yeah, Unstoppable is really good as well. This is really good into melee carries. If you're playing against Cassante or Duelist or Akali or even like the mech mentor, if you're stunning their edgelords and their duelists like Lee Sin, Yone, even like Yasuo and Udyr getting stunned has some value. Basically, it's good against comps where they want their front line to attack. I think that covers just about everything on the crew. This is kind of a long video. There's a lot to talk about. Again, this comp I genuinely just don't think is that good right now, but it is fun to play, and there are some augments like Prismatic Ticket or the crew augment that can make it very strong. That's going to wrap it up on this video. If you have any comments or questions, let me know in Discord, and thanks for watching.